Hey everyone, it's Jared here from Track Habit Garage. So just want to give you another update on the 280Z. I forgot to film what I did last night, so I'm going to catch you up on that and then go over the rest of what I'm going to go through today. So yeah, here it is. Definitely making good progress and getting pretty close to where I'll actually be able to start it up before too long. So here's actually a look at my wiring harness, not including the throttle pedal. You can tell there's a few connectors I was trying to figure out which ones they were, just because they didn't seem to match up with the locations of where I thought they would come out. So for example, the alternator comes off here, but it was nowhere near being able to line up with where I have the alternator. Even if I would have mounted it in the stock truck location. We also had to figure out the coolant temp, which I pretty much knew. I just had to get it extended. Crank position, which is the bottom down by the starter. We have the coolant temp in the back of the engine. There's also the NOx sensor back there, which actually ended up being this one. So there's a ground, the front O2, the mass airflow runs up, and then there's this. So it's actually not front O2 and rear O2, it's left and right. But yeah, that's pretty much my wiring harness really simplified down. So general update on the car, all of the engine wiring except for the last wire on the alternator and the starter is all done. See, it's a little bit of a rat's nest back here. I need to figure out a little bit better option. We got all the injectors, NOx sensor, oil pressure, coolant. I had to extend the wire for the coolant because the guy that did my harness made it way too short. Similarly for the alternator, to run it down there and get it around. No matter how I was going to run it, it wasn't going to work. Also have the intake on with the mass airflow. Basically just dumping it here for now. Eventually I want to pull it through to the front of the car and have it dump out in front of the radiator. I have the parts to do so, but you know, I just want to get this running for now and then I can always fix that later. I happen to have this air filter around. It's an older Spectra air filter. The one I purchased for it actually isn't going to fit right now. You can see I also ran the radiator hose lines here. So we have the top and the bottom line down there. I actually wanted to run the intake over to the other corner. It fit a little bit better, but it got in the way of that radiator hose. And I'm just trying to run these universal lines for now. We'll see how they work. I may just have to go with the actual rubber lines. They'll probably be a better choice. So you can see the throttle body connection there, mass airflow sensor, all of the injectors and the coil packs and everything. One thing when you're doing this, don't forget about your crank sensor down there above the starter. It's going to be pretty hard to see. Let's see if I can get this. It's actually back there, kind of in the middle of the screen behind the starter. And your dipstick, of course. But yeah, once I got it figured out, not too bad. I also need to order the Braille battery that I have the box for here. I'm going to run that lithium ion battery for this. So up next, I'm going to run my heater hoses over to the back there. You can see that they're taped off in the middle of the screen. I'm also going to run the PCV hose from there and the other side of the valve cover. I'm going to come down, wide off, and it's going to go into a catch can that's going to mount right here to the head. Catch can's on order, but I'm just going to run the hose so when it comes I can just hook it up. And then from that catch can, it's going to go into the intake right there. Should only be clean air at that point. That's the point of the catch can. Coming over here, we have the steam port line. So also I blocked off the hoses from the bottom of the throttle body. This is a really crappy way. I just did it, but I have vacuum caps for these. So here, the steam port, I'm going to bring this down. It's going to go into, I have a barb fitting here on the water pump plates, basically, that extended it out. This is going to get blocked off with a vacuum cap. and then the other PCV comes out right back there, and that's going to run up Y into the other one and then get dumped into the coolant tank, or sorry, the catch can. Okay, so I ran the line from the alternator, comes up, tracks some other ones, and then I also finished the wire for the starter. So we have the wire coming from the ignition, we have the wire from the alternator, and everything going with the battery cable. And now the battery cables are up here. We have their positive, negatives down here. Those are all run, ready for the battery. I'll get the dipstick in and then move on to a few other fun things like running the heater line and dealing with the PCV valves. Okay, so just for a note for installing the dipstick, this one kind of sucks because it's so tall, so I'll probably have to get another one to fit this application. But for me, basically fit it between the middle cylinders on this side, and it goes down there, and you'll see it will bolt up right here above the headers into the cylinder head. When doing the dipstick, it's very much worthwhile to get under the car real quick and make sure it's fully seated in here, which this one is, so we're ready to bolt it up. But the first time when I put it under here, it was a little off camber and I had to wiggle it around and get it to go in. Alright, so we have the heater hoses run now. The one thing about having the engine really close to the back of the car here is I can't run them around the side like I wanted to do. I have to run them over the top because otherwise they'll kink. So eventually it'll be nice. I should find an adapter to put in here or something. But right now they're basically just running over the top, down and to the water pump. And now I've begun to start filling the radiator. So I've already put an entire container of antifreeze in here along with some water. The radiator's still not full, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start filling from the upper radiator tube. And basically I'm going to fill, and it should eventually start coming out of the steam port here, so I'm intentionally leaving that steam port uncapped so I can see when it comes out. So the reason for doing this is to make sure that there's not air built up in the system. So basically I should be filling the radiator, and I want to fill from the top as well because that'll help circulate it through the engine. And when it comes out here, like basically it should be bleeding air, and then when that turns into water, I know that it's full. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. Just wanted to share one quick derp moment with you. Forgot to put the fitting in for the steam port. So basically what I want to do is put this fitting in and then run the line up, and it has to be at least as tall as the steam port, so I'm going to put extra on it. It's going to need to be pretty long to loop around anyway, but need to do that, otherwise the water just comes out of here as expected. One more thing that I already did but forgot to cover, I upholstered the rear seat. You can see it up there, it's just sitting down, so it's the black fake leather with burnt orange stitching. And then here's the back of that seat, so you can see the orange stitching here and the little vents. So the back seat is upholstered and it's going to go in. It's basically just going to be for looks only to fill the space here behind the roll bar. And then we'll get the front seats. I'm in process of upholstering the door cards as well. You can see them here behind me.